Thanks to all of you guys for coming tonight. I'm going to let Mary introduce you, but I'm going to introduce Mary. Mary Bonauto is the Civil Rights Project Director of the New England-wide Gay and Lesbian Advocates and Defenders. Ms. Bonauto's practice concentrates on impact litigation for the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender communities, as well as people living with HIV or AIDS. She has litigated widely in the state and federal courts and agencies of the 6 New England states for the last 12 years. In 1999, she and 2 Vermont co-counsel won a ruling that same-sex couples are entitled to all of the benefits and protections of civil marriage in the case of Baker versus State of Vermont. This ruling prompted the Vermont legislature to enact the nation's first civil union law for same-sex couples. She is presently counsel in Goodridge versus Department of Public Health, a case pending in the Massachusetts courts seeking civil marriage for same-sex couples. Ms. Bonauto is a graduate of Hamilton College and Northeastern University School of Law. She serves on the Family Law Steering Committee of the Boston Bar Association and is the North American co-chair of the International Lesbian and Gay Law Association. In addition, she is a member of the Massachusetts Attorney General's Working Group on Racial Profiling. So I introduce her, and I also, one last big thank you to GLAAD for helping us organize tonight's event. Thank you all.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you to the Ford Hall Forum for this incredibly rare opportunity. You're going to be able to hear tonight, not through the media and not in a courtroom, but hear directly from some of the people who have brought this lawsuit to the Massachusetts courts. And we really want to make sure that they have a chance to speak to you in their own words about who they are and why they're doing this. And then, as Tom had mentioned, about halfway through the program to open it up so that we can actually have a discussion with you about your concerns and your questions, and you'll be able to direct those directly to the folks who are sitting here and who are participating. As Tom mentioned, I've been an attorney at Gay and Lesbian Advocates and Defenders since 1990. And we are counsel in this case, but it's myself and my colleagues, Jennifer Levi, Gary Buzik, Karen Lowy, and Ben Klein. We've basically got the whole office together to represent these folks in this case. And as Tom mentioned, GLAAD was part of this case in Vermont, where the Vermont Supreme Court for the first time really recognized that the issue here, as they put it, was one of our common humanity. And I really think that tonight you're going to get to hear from human beings, not just lawyers talking about doctrine. And I hope that the Vermont Supreme Court's insight will then become that much clearer. I wanted to add a little bit about our perspective as lawyers before I turn it over to the real people involved in the case, so that you know a little bit about where we're coming from. From our perspective, I have talked to thousands of people in the last 12, 13 years who have faced some kind of legal problem because they're gay. And from my perspective, and I hope this isn't terribly controversial, gay people exist. They exist in every community in this Commonwealth. We know that to be true even from the census. People make sacrifices for one another. They're very committed to one another. And yet at the same time, by saying that you're not a family unless you're married, you're really pretending all of these people who are families don't exist. And because marriage and because family are such important institutions in our society, the categorical exclusion of gay people from participating in these can be very harmful. I'm going to give you just 2 examples that have come through our office. One involved a man who had been partnered with a man who'd been a Boston firefighter for over 40 years. The firefighter eventually got throat cancer. His partner, who's the one who contacted us, had to swab his throat out every day for 2 years and cared for him as he slowly and painfully died from this throat cancer. Well, when the firefighter finally died, his pension died with him. So what happened to the survivor was that he lost the love of his life, and he also lost his economic security. Had he been a married spouse, that pension would have continued, and this man would have had to suffer through the loss of his partner, but he wouldn't have faced economic devastation as he did when his partner died. Another example, a lesbian couple from the western part of the state who'd been together 39 years. One of them required nursing home care. Well, nursing home care is very expensive, and the one who needed nursing home care went into a nursing home, but because this couple was not married, the house that they jointly owned became an asset from the state's perspective that was to be attached to pay for nursing home care. If they had been married, that house would have been off limits until the community partner, the surviving partner, died. That's a courtesy and that is extended to spouses. That's not an option that's available to same-sex couples. So from our perspective, if we care about building strong communities, we care about strong families, why wouldn't we allow this pension to continue? Why would we force someone out of their home because their partner needs nursing home care? That's really what we're talking about here. These are the kinds of things we face as lawyers, and very often we have to say to people, there is nothing you can do because you are not married. Now, I also want to be clear in this discussion tonight that we're talking about the institution of civil marriage, legal marriage. It's the only kind of marriage that the Commonwealth of Massachusetts recognizes is the civil legal institution of marriage. Of course, there are many faiths that have marriage ceremonies, religious rites, R-I-T-E-S, if you will, within those faiths. Those are not at issue here at all. Every faith remains free, no matter what the result in this case or any case, to decide which relationships it will sanctify or certify as marriages within that faith. Nothing in this case will change that. The other thing I wanted to just note is, I'm glad you're here because I really I see this issue as a central civil rights issue of our time. It's certainly been an issue in the gubernatorial debates here in Massachusetts. And it was even an issue, I don't know if some of you remember this, in the vice presidential debates in the fall of 2000. At one point, during one of those televised debates, one of the moderators posed a question, a man loves a man, a woman loves a woman, should they have equal constitutional rights? Well, both Senator Lieberman and now Vice President Cheney answered that question not by talking about hate crimes, not by talking about employment, not by talking about domestic partnership, but by talking about marriage. And they were both struggling with the issue, although Senator Lieberman seemed to struggle more than Vice President Cheney did, frankly. Vice President Cheney's answer was to acknowledge that gay and lesbian people exist in this country and that we have a right to form relationships and that states should decide the issue. And that's exactly what we're trying to do here, is decide the issue. Now, of course, it's not just an issue in Massachusetts. There's a case, a very similar case to this one pending in the state of New Jersey, and it's an issue worldwide. The Netherlands actually, starting in April of 2000, began allowing marriage, no restrictions, marriage for same-sex couples. There are actually an increasingly large number of countries that have a system called registered partnership, where you essentially get all the rights and benefits of marriage, or almost all of them, but it's not called marriage. And our neighbor to the north, that's Canada, has actually been moving very rapidly on this issue, particularly in the court context. And don't be surprised if you see a case at the Supreme Court of Canada in the next year and a half or so, and that would be the equivalent of going to the United States Supreme Court. Now, just to bring the lens back to Massachusetts for a moment, and again, speaking as a lawyer, in Massachusetts, I'm going to tell you what it takes to get married. Here's the list. You have to be just two adults. Neither of them can be presently married. They can't be closely related. They have to pass a blood test, namely a syphilis test, and they have to pay a small fee. That's it. Any couple who meets those requirements can marry in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. The only exception is couples who are of the same sex, such as these folks here sitting at this table. Now, you'll hear from these folks that they went and they did apply for marriage licenses and they were denied. And we eventually all hooked up and we filed suit on their behalf in April of 2001 against the State Department of Public Health. And we sued them because they're the people who really regulate the marriage laws and administer the marriage laws in this state. And the lawsuit asks for something very simple. It asks that we get a declaration from the court that the exclusion of these couples from marriage violates the Massachusetts Constitution. Our claims under the Constitution are really very simple. One is that, in accord with just voluminous case law, that marriage, the decision to marry somebody and who you want to marry is protected under the Constitution. That's something the state can't interfere with. They can't tell you must marry or who you must marry or that you can't marry. And that's part of what our claim is. It's a liberty claim. And the other part of our claim is that this is about equality, that just about everyone has the right to marry, and these people are part of the community as well, and telling them they cannot marry violates their rights as equal citizens. Now, when we filed this case, the Attorney General of the state defends the constitutionality of the laws. They came in, defended the case, and we lost the first round, which was disappointing but really not surprising, in May of this year. And we have now appealed, and we are presently in the state Supreme Court. and the state Supreme Court has scheduled arguments for next winter, spring, depending how you want to put it, in the February or March time frame. So between now and then, our side will be filing its briefs explaining why we think we're right. The other side will do the same thing, and then the court will sort it out. I wanted to let you know just very briefly what the state's justifications are for excluding same-sex couples from marriage, and at least give you a little bit of an initial reaction, although it's the kind of thing we'd be happy to talk about at greater length tonight. One is the idea that marriage, the purpose of marriage is procreation. That was their first argument, and that's actually the one that the state trial court judge latched on to. And from our perspective, understanding that, of course, people have a lot of associations with marriage and procreation, but looking at it, in the cold-hearted analysis, if you will, of what the law does and doesn't provide, we know already that two 90-year-olds can meet in a nursing home and fall in love and get married. Procreation is not the issue. The state does not license procreation. It licenses marriage. And the state simply does not use procreation as the basis for saying who can and cannot get into a marriage. It would never refuse a marriage license to a postmenopausal woman. It wouldn't say to that 90-year-old, forget it, you're too old to procreate. It's a protected choice. You're in. Procreation is not the issue. The second thing they brought forward was the idea of child rearing, that kids are better off with a mother and a father. That's what the purpose of the marriage laws is to ensure that children are raised by a mother and father. Now, of course, this is an emotional thing because everyone cares about child welfare. Everyone wants children to be the best off that they can possibly be. But when you think about it from a legal perspective, I'll tell you about some of the developments in the law in recent years, are that right now, if a child is born to a married couple or an unmarried couple, the law says we don't care. That child is supposed to have equal rights under the law no matter what the circumstances of their birth. So to argue that the purpose of marriage is to promote a male-female child-rearing arrangement simply falls apart when you look at the fact that the courts have really tried, and the legislatures as well, have really tried to equalize the status of children, whether their parents are married or not. And the other thing, of course, that I always want to say is, if we care about children's welfare, then why wouldn't you let their parents get married, including their gay and lesbian parents? Because marriage provides so many protections to a couple and therefore to their children. The third thing the state brought up, and the trial court judge was kind of funny about this oral argument and pointed out that this was not the Attorney General's best argument, but the Attorney General mounted an argument that the marriage laws can be justified on the basis of conserving resources, fiscal resources of the state. And every state wants to save money, we get that, but the idea that that purpose is advanced through the marriage laws, again, is really way off the mark, and we know that for many reasons, including the fact that the state itself acknowledges that married couples have an obligation to support each other. And because they have an obligation to support each other, they're less likely to rely on the state for the kinds of expensive social welfare benefits that sometimes have to be directed towards single people because they don't have someone else to take care of them. So if you're thinking about conserving resources, you're actually thinking about trying to encourage people to get married. So that's a little bit of a framework about where we've been, what's happening in the case, and where we're headed. And with that, I really want to turn over the bulk of this to the clients. And what we're going to do is we're going to start at this end of the table and work our way down. And we're going to start with Gina Smith and Heidi Norton. And then I'll just introduce the rest of you. I'll introduce all of you right now. Then we have Mike Horgan and Ed Balmally and Julie and Hillary and Julie Goodrich at the other end of the table. So we'll start right here.
Thanks, Mary. Can you hear me through here? Thanks. I just wanted to tell you a little bit about my family, my life with Gina, my partner. We've been together for 12 years, and we made a commitment 10 years or so ago that we wanted to live our lives together, that we wanted to have children and enter what we consider a marriage. And we've relocated to Massachusetts after having a commitment celebration in Maryland in 1993. And we have fulfilled our lifelong dream of having children. We have two wonderful young sons, Avery and Quinn, and we have the family that we've always dreamed of having. We have very ordinary lives in many respects. We have a home, and we worry about getting the kids to school on time, and who's going to pick up who from daycare, and checking to make sure that the lunch bag gets cleaned out every night, and how to get leaves out of the gutter. The kinds of things that we all think about every day and try to work out within a relationship and navigate through daily daily activities. We're very active in our son's schools, fundraising and helping to support the schools. We sing in a local choir, gospel choir, with our children. We volunteer and participate on boards and other activities within our community. And we attend a local Quaker meeting, which has been very embracing and supportive of our family, and has always supported our relationship and what they consider our marriage together, and is very much looking forward to the day when they can participate in a legal marriage ceremony for us within Massachusetts. That's been our experience in general living in Western Massachusetts. Our community is very supportive of us. When our next-door neighbor learned that we were expecting our first child, she made a point of finding the other one of us to congratulate both of us. And she understood, being a mom and a grandmother, that this was a family celebration, and it was something that we were both looking forward to very much. Our whole neighborhood participates in the overseeing of our children as they ride their bikes up and down the street, and comments on how they're growing and what a beautiful bike. And we feel very much like we have the life that we always sought to create together. We want to get married for the same reason that other people in Massachusetts want to get married, to seal that commitment to each other, to celebrate that commitment, and to be able to express to others what relationship we have, a marriage, the way we see it. But within this very full and happy life, there are some things missing, and Gina will talk a little bit about what's missing for us.
Do I need to get closer to the mic, or can you hear me? When we were anticipating the birth of our first child, Avery, we did a lot of the things that most people in that position do. We decided that we needed to get wills, because when you have a kid, you get a will to make sure that everything you want to be left behind for your child, and the care of your child, and the custody of your child, all that stuff. So we went to see a lawyer, and we had wills drawn up. And in the conversation with our lawyer, we heard that we needed a durable power of attorney because, we weren't married to each other, and we had to make this affirmative statement that in the case of one of us being infirm, what we wanted to have happen, so the other person could be in charge and could be in control of the property and the children and all of that stuff. So when Avery was born, we thought we were good to go because we'd done all the stuff we were supposed to do. Fortunately, Avery's birth was great. It was a wonderful thing, and we wanted to show him off. So 2 weeks after he was born, we went to visit Heidi's stepfather in New Hampshire. And we got there, and we showed off our new baby, and, everybody, it was great. But that night, Heidi started to hemorrhage, and she was hemorrhaging uncontrollably. So after we talked to our midwife, who told us that we needed to go to the emergency room. And so in this snowstorm in New Hampshire, going to the hospital, the whole way to the hospital, I keep telling myself, remember, the first thing you have to say to them when you walk in the door is that you have her health care proxy, that you hold her health care proxy, and that you are the person who is designated to make decisions for her care. If in case, she's hemorrhaging out of control, I don't know what the problem is, and I don't know how serious it is, but I'm just imagining the worst because we're so far from home, and we're going to this place where I don't know anybody, this hospital. And I just thought, all this time that we've been together and taking care of each other, and we finally have this baby that we wanted for so long, and she might die in this hospital. And, what if we get to the hospital and I can't see her if they won't let me in to be with her? And what's going to happen to Avery? Because it was 2 weeks after his birth. I had not adopted him at that moment. Are they going to take him away from me too? And so that really brought home how totally unprotected we were as a family. Here we were so happy, and then it could all have been just a horrible experience. Besides being scary, about how she was. But as you can see, she's here. And Avery is fine. But it was just this very real experience of how despite how we feel about each other and our families are so supportive of us, we need something more. There's something missing for us, and we should have it. I mean, it's such a simple thing.
Thank you. Mike and Ed.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ed Balmelli, and I'm originally from Milford, Massachusetts. I have family still living there. I'm the second oldest of 6 kids. We also have 6 nieces and nephews. We go home, participate in family events, cookouts. We just went to our 19th annual O'Brien family reunion down in Squamicut, and both Mike and I go as a couple and participate. I work at Lucent Technologies up in North Andover. I've been there for 22 years now, and I've also been going to school the whole time I've been working. I've got my associates from Northeastern, my bachelor's from Merrimack College, and I just got my master's from BU. So I've been a little busy. And Mike.
Hi, my name is Mike Horgan. I also grew up in a small central Massachusetts town of Ayr. I also come from a large Irish Catholic family. I have 6 sisters and 2 brothers, and much of my family still resides in Ayr. And at the last count, I have 16 nieces and nephews. I'm also godfather to my oldest niece. In '94, I graduated from UMass Lowell, the Bachelor's of Science degree. I am now a computer network systems engineer, and I'm currently looking for work. That's the way things are these days. Ed and I met 8 years ago this December, and I'll let Ed tell a little bit more about our story.
Yeah, we actually met at a Christmas party up in Lowell through mutual friends, and when we started talking, we started talking about school, and we started talking about family, which was not a usual conversation that we had been having that night. And we just started catching on that, this was really something. So we decided that, we should have another date. So since it was a week away from Christmas and I hadn't done my shopping yet, I decided that would be a great way to kill 2 birds with 1 stone kind of thing. In case it didn't work out, I'd still get my shopping done. But I was so worried that it wouldn't work out that I went 2 hours earlier and did all my shopping before I actually got to meet with Mike, so that now we had nothing to do as far as shopping goes. So we decided to go to the food court and just have something to eat, and it actually worked out to be really cool because there was no expectations or pressures or anything, and we joke about how our first date is eating off paper plates and plastic knives in the food court.
And our second date involved a U-Haul. But we weren't moving in together. At that point, this guy I just met was nice enough to help me move to my new apartment in Dorchester. And after about a year's worth of driving back and forth between Dorchester and North Andover, where Ed lived, we decided it would be better if I just moved in with him. And we lived in Ed's condo for a couple of years, and we decided to start looking for a house in Jamaica Plain. And in January of '98, we bought a nice 2-family in Central JP, and that's where we've been ever since. That's us.
That's
Right, Hillary and Julie Goodrich.
Is this okay? Okay. Hi, I'm Hillary Goodrich, and in thinking about coming here tonight, I started thinking about when the issue of marriage really became on my front burner, and it occurred to me that it was about 20 years ago when I spent what feels like the entire summer being a bridesmaid. And I don't know if any other women or men in the audience ever had this experience, but I had to be a bridesmaid 4 times in one particular summer, which meant I spent the summer in unbelievable shades of mint green and pink and with shoes to match, and it was really a nightmare. And, I was out as a lesbian at the time, and everyone knew I was a lesbian, but they kept inviting me to be a bridesmaid because I'm such a lovely person. And so I started thinking at that time, why always a bridesmaid, never a bride, right? Why can't I do that? Why can't I do what they're doing? So I developed this sort of bizarre little ritual to deal with how angry I was about it, which was that I made a vow to myself that I would catch the bouquet at each and every wedding I went to, which means whoever catches the bouquet is the next one to get married, right? So I went to more weddings than I was a bridesmaid in, and it was brutal a couple of times. I involved a lot of elbowing. You guys know what it's like to catch the bouquet, or what it was like in the 80s anyway. And by the end of the summer, I had a trunk full of bouquets. And I kept them there for about a year, and then it became sort of funereal and gross. But that was the first time that I really realized I have an issue here, and this is making me angry. I fell in love with Julie 15 years ago, and I'm still as in love with her today as I was then. She is the smartest and sweetest and most beautiful and funniest person I've ever known. She makes me laugh every day. She is also an incredible mother to our daughter, Annie. She's my favorite person in the world. And we do all the things that most couples both endure and celebrate. We've been through death, we've been through renovations, and best of all, the birth of our daughter. And in my heart, I'm totally married to Julie. But the reality is that I cannot live up legally to the vows that I made to her, which are to love and care for her in sickness and in health, and even after death. Legally, I'm barred from living up to those vows. Gina and Heidi's story about the birth of Avery was very evocative for us as well. When Annie was born, Julie gave birth to her, and it was a cesarean section. It was a planned cesarean section, but there were complications. And Annie, the minute after she was born, had to be rushed off to neonatal intensive care, and she couldn't breathe on her own. We had a wonderful OBGYN who had let me be in the room during the procedure, which was great and not usual practice. So I'd been there during the course of that. So, there's Julie cut open with everything on the table, and they're rushing the child that I have helped conceive and talk to every day for 9 months, rushing her off to the NICU unit. And I didn't know where to go, but I went, and Julie said, because she wasn't completely sedated, go with Annie. So I went with Annie and stayed with her for about an hour and a half while they stabilized her, and they, put those horrible masks on her, and they put needles in her arms, which they had to strap to boards so she wouldn't pull them out. And then once she was, fairly okay, but we still didn't know, I needed to get back to Julie to tell her what had happened, because there's no system of communication, Julie's just in recovery at this point. So I leave the NICU unit and I go down to where Julie was, and I have to get by a barrage of nurses and administrators, and they say, well, who are you? And at that point, I realized only immediate family is allowed to see people who are in recovery from this kind of surgery, and I do not qualify as immediate family. However, one of the smartest things Julie and I had done, in addition to all the healthcare proxies and durable powers of attorney, was that we changed our name. We're not sisters, we're not related, we don't happen to have the same last name. We changed our last names in anticipation of being the family that we are. So I said that I was Hillary Goodridge, I was Julie's sister, and I needed to get in to see her, and they let me in. So there's, one lie. Then I tell Julie that Annie's okay, and I see that she's probably going to be okay. I see that Julie's going to be okay, and I have to go back up to the NICU unit. Well, there's a new nurse on at the NICU unit, and I can't get in because I'm clearly not the mother. They know the mother has had a C-section. Who the hell am I? I have no legal relationship to Annie whatsoever. So eventually, through pleading and cajoling and showing that I did have the same last name as the child, they let me in. Eventually, Annie turned out to be absolutely fine. 20 hours later, she got to be with Julie, and I spent 20 hours running back between the two of them. Nobody should have to go through that. And every gay and lesbian person that I know has a story. Sometimes it's a minor story. Sometimes it is a horrific major story. And I don't think there are too many people who would say, yeah, you should have to endure that. That's something that should happen to people. To the people in our neighborhood, we're a family that rakes the leaves, that cuts out the weird pumpkins, that rides bikes and makes a lot of noise. We're a family. To the people at Annie's school, we're the family that shows up for the committee meetings and sells cupcakes at the bake sale. And yet, in the eyes of the law, we are not a family. We have no legal relationship to each other. So that's why a little over a year and a half ago, Julie and I went down
and got blood tests, which we passed, and applied for a marriage license.
Well, I fell in love with Hillary 17 years ago, which was approximately 2 years before she fell in love with me. So we were already off to an interesting start. And I was never a bridesmaid. I always wanted to be a bridesmaid, but all my friends, had these very small family weddings. And I really never thought a lot about marriage early into our relationship, and I didn't ever think about it, period. I know in my heart that I love Hillary and that Hillary is my family. Hillary and Annie are my family. And the fact that we have a common last name is really important to me because we picked the last name. We went through Hillary's family tree and we went through mine too, but I had really awful names in my family, like Swear John and things with lots of consonants. So we thought that Goodrich sounded like a positive name, so we decided on that. And because of the situation, sometimes I think we have foresight that we don't give ourselves credit for, and I think that that's why we knew that it was important to have the same name as our daughter, and I think that it's proven. Certainly, we've been to the emergency room twice with Annie, and it's always been helpful that we all had the same last name. I didn't start thinking about marriage really until about 2 years ago. Now, we had already had a private commitment ceremony in our backyard, which we were joking and saying, well, it was our opportunity for Hillary to make an honest woman out of me because I was 9 months pregnant at the time. And it was interrupted by our neighbor asking to borrow our hedge trimmers. So it wasn't sort of a very touching moment in front of family and friends. But 2 years ago, our daughter Annie asked us if we were married. And it was at that point that I started realizing and really thinking about what the difference was between people who are married and people who are not married. And I realized that, we have a loving and committed relationship and a strong family unit. And a married couple has a hopefully loving and committed relationship, and they are a strong family unit. And the only difference is that they have a legal relationship to one another. And that is purely what we are hoping to get by being participants in this lawsuit. Is we genuinely would like to be recognized as the family that we feel that we are. When I met Hillary down at City Hall when we were bringing in the results of our blood tests and our, $25 or $20, I don't remember, to get our marriage license. And I was on the train and I thought, oh, I'm so excited. I mean, what if they let us do it? I mean, this would be amazing. We won't have to go through any kind of hassle. It'll be great. And I thought, Hillary's conservative Republican father feels that I am his daughter-in-law. He sends me Valentine's Day cards, just like he sends them to Hillary and to Annie. And I thought, why won't the state just give us the same recognition? So when we got to the little desk there down in the basement of the building, we said we're here to apply for a marriage license, and the officials basically said, where are the grooms? And we said, there aren't any grooms. We're two brides, I guess, and we would like to be able to get married to each other. And they sort of scurried around in the back, and, they had to check the laws and make phone calls and things of that nature. But, when it was all over, and obviously we didn't get a marriage license, but when it was all over, Hillary went back to work, and I got back on the T to go home to my office, and I just felt really incredibly sad. And I thought, we really need to be able to do this to protect our family and our daughter. And it doesn't seem like it's that big a deal to me. We just want to be able to get married.
Thank you, everybody. If I may, I'd like to pose a few questions to folks up here because they did try to keep their remarks brief. And perhaps I'll just throw it open to whoever wants to answer this first. Why is it that marriage is so important to you that you would participate in a lawsuit about it? What is it about marriage? What does marriage mean to you?
Well, to me, it's about equality. Except the youngest, all my brothers and sisters are married. And when they get married, that started a family unit. They're all their individual families, with the exception of Ed and I. I mean, they recognize us as a couple, but they don't. My family doesn't really recognize us as a family yet, as much as we do. So that's what it is to me. It's about equality.
So you feel like your family would recognize you as a family if you were married, but they don't recognize you otherwise?
Oh yes, very much so.
Interesting. And how about you, Gina and Heidi? You want to tell us about the reactions of your family and why is it that marriage is important?
Go ahead. I'm from Baltimore, and everybody, several generations wise, in my family lives in Baltimore. And every summer we have a huge family reunion. And the first time we had it, Heidi and I had just gotten together. And I didn't bring Heidi because, for lots of reasons, but that many people all at once can be really overwhelming in a new relationship. But I was pretty much castigated by my family about not bringing her because they did recognize us as a family. And when we had our commitment celebration a few years later, I think it's interesting that in my family and in the people who know us, our friends, they were surprised to realize that there was no legal relationship created, that we weren't legal spouses, even though we had, had the event catered and, stood up in front of them and said these very heartfelt things about each other and exchanged rings, and we'd done all the other things, and, we cried, and, and I said things to my mother, you never say to your mother, about how wonderful it is that, for me, that she let me be the person that I am and love me and support us. And we did all that stuff, and they see, that we're right there about taking care of each other and our commitment to each other, but we still can't really do it, and it's not because of us. So that's why we're part of the case. We're ready. We've already accepted all the stuff that we can accept.
Each of you have talked a little bit about some of the legal documents you've drawn up. You mentioned healthcare proxies, and I think you mentioned a durable power of attorney. Can somebody explain a little bit about what protections it is that you have, and what is it that you feel like you're missing? I mean, what is the impetus to marriage in particular?
I thought we had everything, actually. I thought we had, all the paperwork that lined up, and then somewhere in doing research about marriage, I realized that if I drop dead in our living room or some other room in our house, Hillary does not have the right to have my body removed from our home. And she doesn't have the right to do that because she is not my next of kin, because we have no legal relationship. And my next of kin is my Aunt Kate, who lives in Lumberton, Mississippi, and is 99 years old. Now, there's...
And deaf.
And deaf, totally deaf. You can't call her on the phone. So, yeah. So I just realized, that was something that we didn't have, in addition to, lots of the legal work that we had done.
Well, we had a similar thing. We thought we had all our bases covered. We got the wills. But one thing that our lawyer told us to get, which was a declaration as to remains that supposedly would cover us for what you just brought up, but we don't know.
And we don't have the durable power of attorney, so if he dies, then I can have them take the body away. But if he lives and is in a coma, then I don't have the power to take money and pay the bills from his account because we didn't do that yet. So there's always something.
Yeah, and I think part of it, I mean, we have this huge stack of papers that you know, are we supposed to carry them with us every time we go on vacation? Do we need them whenever we travel? What if Annie gets sick? You know, I adopted Annie, but do I need to bring her the adoption papers? And part of it is we can go through, there are hundreds of protections that marriage supplies. I mean, I was really shocked. And the problem is for people that, I'm 47. How old am I? I have no idea how old I am.
You're 46.
I'm 46. You know, after you get 45, you got to do the math backwards. But that the things that marriage provides protections for are the kind of things that come up when you least need them to come up. It involves death. It involves disability, bad things, you know, divorce. All kinds of things that we don't, especially if you're in your 20s and 30s, do not spend a lot of time thinking about. So when I started going through the list of protections, from access to health insurance to burial plots and Social Security and pension benefits and, you know, more minor things but inconvenient nonetheless, such as car rentals, it's an incredible list. And marriage is really the gateway into that architecture.
Yeah, we're often, I'm just going to interject here for a second, we're often approached by people on the telephone or, you know, in person about, you know, can I just go see a good lawyer, as though you have the money to pay for a good lawyer, and, you know, can I just go to a good lawyer and take care of this problem by drafting a few documents, and only if it were that simple. You know, when Hillary mentions hundreds of benefits, it's literally true. There are hundreds of both benefits and responsibilities just under state law that come automatically with a marriage license that costs $25 in the city of Boston and less than some other places around the state. And she's really right when she points out how marriage laws can be there for you as a safety net at times of tragedy and hardship. I mean, one of the things, I was talking to some people who work in a labor organization recently, and, you know, one of the things that comes up, for example, is if you get injured or killed on a job, workers' compensation benefits are there to automatically presume that the spouse, you know, was economically dependent on the person who got injured. Well, you know, you don't think about that kind of thing on a day-to-day basis until you need it. And the same thing with death. You know, a lot of people, these people have all consciously thought about preparing wills. I bet if we surveyed in this room, the vast majority of you do not have wills. And, you know, if these folks died without a will, they're legally nobody to each other. I can't tell you the number of calls we have fielded at GLAAD over the years on that very issue. And it was particularly painful in the, I think in the early 90s, at least when I had first started at GLAAD, and there was still, you know, still so much ignorance about the rights and protections available for people who had AIDS and were still dying quite rapidly. And people would call us and say, I've been in this relationship 24 years, and now the family's cleaning out the furniture. Can I do anything about it? And the answer often was no. Not unless you know, if you don't have a will, no, there's not much you can do about it. So I'm glad that you've shared a little bit about some of your perspective on that. Now, some of you have kids. Clearly, you've heard a little bit about that. I'm wondering if you could talk about, I know it's unfair probably to put you in this position, but your parenting, what you do versus what your neighbors do who are married, is there anything different there? Is there anything that's missing on your end? Be critical of yourselves. I mean, you know, are you anything like the parents that are next door that have kids who are married?
I think that
or are you just weird?
I think that I find when my daughter goes to a private school, our daughter goes to a private school just outside of Boston, and, you know, there are fairly wealthy people whose kids go to this school. So I think that the only difference between myself when I'm dropping Annie off in the morning and those other people is a lot of the other moms don't have jobs. And so when they're hanging around the school having coffee and stuff, I'm doing that too and giving tours to prospective students and, you know, attending parent association meetings and that kind of thing. But then I have to go back to my job. And that's really pretty much the only difference that I can see.
Well, does your daughter perceive a difference between you and her friends who have married parents, or you with your sons?
Well, I think our sons perceive themselves to be very much like the other children in our community. All of their children all of their playmates are lucky enough to have parents who love them. And when the parents get together and stand around at the playground watching them play, we're all talking about the same things, you know, chickenpox vaccine or no, or, do you try to take the bottle away before age 2 or not? The typical parenting questions. And what characterizes all of our relationships with our children is immense love and wanting the best for them. And I think the difference for what we're experiencing as parents is that there's a lot more uncertainty and there's a lot more worry and stress that goes along with caring for and protecting our children. Some of the other answers about why marriage is important, the first word that comes to me is uncertainty. I feel like these are very uncertain times for all of us for a number of reasons. And just in terms of something like taking a family trip on an airplane, which ordinarily would be a very happy and relaxing experience. Well, sometimes relaxing traveling with children, but we've all experienced a heightened sense of uncertainty at airports these days, and a feeling of what are we going to have to go through. It's magnified tenfold for those of us who don't have a legal relationship to each other, who are legal strangers to one another, and are traveling with children who we feel the need to protect around strangers, protect in a large environment with lots going on, protect with the security officials asking questions or directing people in one way or another, and you don't have a lot of autonomy in that situation. And to feel in that context like you cannot explain your family structure with words that make sense to people. We're married. Oh, you're married. Okay. Oh, you're the two parents. Okay, go in this line. Or there's an emergency precaution. This is what's going to happen to families. This is what's going to happen to people who are together. Are we together? Can we explain that in a way that makes sense? So the love is there. The desire to just protect and keep our children feeling safe and secure is compromised by the fact that we don't always feel safe and secure when we're traveling or just in uncertain experiences with them.
Just to add to that for a quick second, one of the things that happens if you're a lesbian gay family and you have kids is you are propelled back into heterosexual world where, and it's not that we were like living some sort of separatist life or something before that, but really most of the people you deal with are then going to have kids, and most of the people who have kids are heterosexual, and especially at school. So I went back to being, in many cases, and I think this was true for you too, the first allegedly gay person that a lot of people at Annie's school and her classmates' parents ever met. Which, this hasn't, I remember going through this in college, so it had been a while since that happened. And, we're sensitive enough because we've all had this experience, all of us up here, that you can tell when people are a little flipped out or a little hesitant about meeting you. Oh my God, you're a lesbian, do you shake hands? What do I do? And, and do we have a play date? Oh my God, what are they going to do with my child? You can sort of see this uncertainty. And one parent actually came up to me at one point and said, well, I just think it's so cool that she has lesbians in her class, that my son has lesbians in the class. It's like, oh, I'm glad I can help you feel cool. But the point being that after the first 6 months of play dates and school meetings and cupcakes and all of that, everybody's fine. And my experience really has been that people's concern around this issue and around, gay families in general is just based in not being around gay families very much. And once you have the opportunity to do so, we are as boring and as interesting as everybody else.
Okay, we'd like to actually turn to that part of the program where we invite you to ask whatever questions you have to the folks up here. If you're going to ask a question, I'd invite you to use the microphone that's here in the middle and to keep your comments brief. And while any of you are getting up to do that, I want to just pose one more question to folks, which is, you're participating in a lawsuit. A lawsuit is a little bit confrontational, and I'm wondering if you've had any sort of, what the reactions have been at work, from your families, from your neighbors. What's been the reaction so far about what you're seeking to do?
For me, it was kind of interesting. I've been out to my parents forever, and when we got interviewed by the Milford Daily News, which is where my family's from, my mom says, I saw that article in the paper. And I said, yeah, what did you think? And she says, well, I thought this was a Boston thing. So, now she's reading it right there in the Milford Daily News. And a sister of mine that we went to school together with, she saw that and she was a little disturbed and she wasn't quite sure what was going to happen. And then a classmate of ours that we had graduated with years ago saw her and said, I saw that article in the paper and I thought it was really great to see that Ed finally found someone and he's willing to stand up for his rights. And that made all the difference in the world for them.
That's great.
We've had overwhelmingly positive, supportive comments from our neighbors and people in our town. We've been biking. We're kind of famous for biking around town everywhere, the four of us, and we've had people call out to us from their front porches, "Thanks for the lawsuit." So we feel like we're making an important contribution. Overwhelmingly positive, but I'll say we did receive a phone call that was really disturbing, and as it happened, I was putting the baby to bed while the phone call came, and I wasn't able to pick up the phone. And our older son was sitting by the answering machine and heard the comments come out into the living room while I was nursing, and just thinking about what kind of hatred he was being exposed to by a stranger who didn't leave a number, didn't leave a name, and didn't make any kind of intelligible conversation other than just to cast some hatred into our living room, felt very sad and discouraging, and particularly because I felt that it wasn't representative of what we're seeing, the general support, and particularly from our family and the people who know us well.
As I said, my entire family lives in Baltimore. My 86-year-old grandmother, when I told her that we were going to be part of this lawsuit, and my grandmother is fairly old school, fairly religious, said very emphatically, "Good for you." So that was her reaction.
How about you guys?
We were taking Annie to school or coming home, and our neighbor, this guy that we haven't known him very long because they moved in across the street a couple of years ago, and they don't have any kids, came running across the street to us and said, "Oh, it's so great what you're doing." And we're like, "We're putting Annie in the car," And he said, "No, the lawsuit, it's so great." And he hugged us, and it was so wonderful. And that sort of says it all about our support that we've been getting.
It reminds me, one of the plaintiffs in the Vermont case, Stan Baker, in the case of Baker versus Vermont, after that Vermont case was filed, he and his partner Peter were sitting in their home, and there was a loud knock on the door. And they thought, "Oh my God, here it comes, the harassment." So they go to the door, and it's a neighbor with a basket full of champagne and goodies saying, "Congratulations on your engagement. So happy for you." So it's great to hear that. Are there any questions we have? Yes, could you come up to the microphone, please? Don't be shy. It's a great opportunity to ask anything you want to ask at all.
I've never been described as shy. I actually have a comment and then a question. First of all, the comment is that I think, from my perspective, part of the problem is that the heterosexual world doesn't know that this is a problem. Truthfully, and I know this sounds terrible, but I have many gay friends. I've helped a couple of my friends come out. I didn't know until I saw the movie on HBO, If These Walls Could Talk, which is an extremely powerful, powerful movie. And I was talking to my mom and dad, who are in their 70s, born-again Christians. My dad's a Native American, my mom's Italian, very, very set in their ways, and I was telling them about this movie that I had seen, and they both thought, I never thought of that. So I think part of the problem is a lack of understanding because of a lack of knowledge of the issue. My question is, does Massachusetts have common law, and are same-sex couples, if we do have common law, are they entitled under the common law to the same rights as heterosexual couples?
Well, thank you for both your comment and your question. And I hope, certainly with respect to your comment, that one of the things that happens in a lawsuit is it just eventually, when it gets to the state Supreme Court, people are going to be paying attention and they'll start reading about it. And hopefully you'll read in the paper, interviews with these folks who will have a chance to explain anew why it is they're going through all this. With respect to your question about common law marriage, the answer is no. There is not common law marriage in Massachusetts, and it's been not permitted for a very, very, very long time. So what that means from the perspective of somebody who's trying to help gay people actually achieve some legal rights is, there are hundreds of laws which you have access to only if you're married, and then there's a few laws that you can try to argue maybe should be applied to us. So these folks can get a health care proxy in the event of some sort of illness, and they can get a will, and maybe they can get this declaration of to remains. I have no idea if that would actually hold up in court. So there's those few documents you can get, but that doesn't mean that you can change the tax laws. They don't have the right to file joint taxes. They don't have the right to get a joint policy of health insurance as a family. I mean, there are all kinds of things that just remain off limits. And if there were common law marriage, then we'd have that route to pursue, but we don't. But it's a fair question. Yes.
First, I have a comment. I'd like to say congratulations on being blessed with very wonderful children. But me being a young person growing up myself, I have a lot of gay friends as well, and sometimes certain issues are kind of hard to deal with, when we go out in public, and things like that. But as regarding to Hillary, and I forgot your name, sorry, Julie, your daughter Annie, can I just ask how old she is? 7. Okay. I understand is she very comfortable with you now as far as understanding your relationship?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just wondering if, as teenagers, we all go through a rebellious stage. If you're ever wondering if maybe she might get to the point where she might maybe feel a little deprived of maybe not having a father physical figure in her life, maybe.
She has a lot of men in her life,
okay.
and which is also which is important to us, and we've talked about that beforehand. And she has really good relationships with them as well. And I think I've actually heard it the other way, which is a lot of her friends will come over to the house and go, "You have 2 moms? Cool." Because that seems great to them too. So I think that the point being, the kids have loving, secure, stable homes, and we try to make ourselves we are very loving, we are very secure, we try to be very stable, and that's the best environment.
Okay, because there's always people that are against it, and
sure.
There are those that are for it. So and you're not always going to be able to be there to help her. You know what I mean when she's in those.
That's come up for us at school. There are certainly kids that have had a hard time understanding what it means to have 2 moms, and it happens a lot. Like for kids who are in the 2nd or 3rd grade, they start teasing kids sometimes. Yeah. So we did have an incident about that, and Annie's got sort of this big personality. I have no doubt that she's going to give us a little trouble when she's a teenager. So whether it comes up around our sexual orientation, I don't know. I'm sure it won't, because that'll be old news to her by then. I'm sure she'll find some other way to drive us completely insane.
I've just one minute. Okay. Is it you legally changed your last name to be the same, right? So if they were to legalize same-sex marriages, would there then be a problem because you already have the same last name? Do you know what I mean?
I know what you mean.
Because they would consider you as sisters,
well,
right?
they would just ask that we weren't blood relatives, and then that would be okay.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And actually, before you go, though, hello, come back. I have a question for you.
I'm sorry.
Which is part of what you're raising, the concern about whether or not their kids are going to get teased?
Yes, because, I see it a lot,
Sure.
and they're not always going to be able to be there to help them, in these, situations. And there's always people that can alter, how you feel about a certain situation. So that's why I meant about the rebellious stage, that maybe after a while, her going back and forth between a heterosexual world and then going back home to, a whole different world,
it's true, and I think that she was teased once, and she'll be teased again in her life. And I think it's a really wise question that you're asking. And I think that it's hard for any parent when their kid is teased. Yeah. And the thing that we do is we help her understand where the other person's coming from, why it feels hard for them to understand our family. We ask her how she feels about our family, and then we help her come up with a response so that when that happens,
Yeah,
she has something to say.
that's what I was trying to see, if she understood the difference and if she's able to deal with it in a good way.
So far, she's fine.
Good. That's wonderful.
Can I respond too?
Thanks.
Yeah.
Is this still on? It's also, for us, it's given us a really good opportunity to talk with our 5-year-old about difference and about respect and about teasing. Our child got teased in school one time because he wore fancy suspenders that his grandmother had sent him, and he was really proud of them in the morning, and by the time he got back, he said, I'm never wearing suspenders again, because they were different. And we talked about, how did that feel to be different, and how did it feel to have kids say that to you about something that you felt proud of? Being in the lawsuit and just talking about marriage and about being different, whether it's being a biracial kid, whether it's being